to our webinar webcast thing that we're doing here. I'm Ben Oliver.
I'm Justin Plant.
We're the co-founders of Storyboard Media. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the first phase of the 7 phases of practicing video.
That's right. Two-part episode.
That's the kind of thing you can only do with a real sponsor. So why don't we address our sponsor for this episode? Our sponsor being Topo Chico. Our sponsor being no one, but we're going to see if this works. Topo Chico for when you want to taste what it's like when your arm falls asleep. Or your arm falls asleep after you taste it. I don't know. I don't think they'll pay us for the second one. We'll let you know. We'll put that in the show notes. Okay, so let's jump right in and get the people what they love, which is our brain stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. So why don't you talk a little bit about what we mean by practicing video?
Yeah, definitely. This came up when we were going through some positioning exercises, I think, and what it came down to is video for us is no longer a noun. It's a verb. It's something that we do. We do it all day, every day. Maybe not all day. I mean,
some days. We do it some days.
Yeah. Not while we're showering or things like that, but
who showers?
But yeah, it's something we, as professionals, it feels weird to follow that up.
It does seem weird to refer to us as professionals.
Yeah. Yes. But practicing videos, so there's a lot that goes into it. It's more than just hitting record and making a video. There's stuff before and there's stuff after. So essentially that's what we mean.
I feel like we're kind of on a mission to civilize when we say this. Like part of, like for our manifesto, for example, right? Which, if you haven't read it, you should definitely check it out and adopt it. Let us know what needs to be changed, add to it, whatever. But like it's all part of redefining the word video, right? And I think it comes from the common misconception that when people think about doing video, they're thinking about making a video. Mm-hmm. So they get to that like MP4 MOV deliverable and it's handed off from their production company and it's like,
all right,
we won. But like, now what? Like what do we do with this?
I think that's what they ask a lot of the time.
Right? It's certainly what got us to where we are.
Yeah.
Is we would do that, right? And everybody, we were really happy with what we made. They were really happy with what we made. It's exactly what they asked us to make, which I think we realized was part of the problem. And so it's not just making the thing, but on the front end, it's why are you making what you're making, right? And then afterward, what are you going to do with it once you've made it? How do you know when it's been successful? How do you know that it's gotten to the right audience? How do you know that it's given them what they need? And how do you even know what all those needs are?
And a lot of this logic has been applied to a lot of media throughout the years, but with video being a new medium for business, they forget, I think, that this is just like any other content. And so I don't think any of this is incredibly new, but there's a different way and some different tools and whatnot to activate your video that people may not be aware of. So I think that's where a lot of the value of this comes in. If you're used to working with content, you probably know a lot of these things in principle, but as it applies to video, there's some nuances that we'd like to share.
And I think the point that we're talking about video for business is also a key point. It's something that I've heard Vidyard saying a lot yesterday or recently, also yesterday. But like with their video and business awards, and Tyler Lessard was at an event doing a talk about video and business, and we say video for business, but it's all the same thing. But that seems to me something also, like we're kind of pushing the whole practicing video thing, but I feel like the whole video for business thing is something that's really getting traction as just kind of an obvious qualifier, right? We're not talking about influencer YouTube channels as much as we're talking, or like makeup channels as we are talking about, like, and it's specifically for us B2B also, right? Most of our clients are B2B, and there's a certain way that kind of sales cycle works in B2B.
A lot of things we say may come through that lens.
Yeah. All right, so why don't we go ahead and introduce everyone to what we believe are the 7 phases of practicing video.
As you can see visually here, the largest element of this is the foundation. This is a pyramid shape.
Pyramid scheme?
You seem to think so. No, so at the bottom is strategy. That is the whole bottom layer. There's kind of 4 steps here. You've got strategy, on the bottom.
The foundation.
Then the way we like to look at it is everything that comes after that, above it, whether that's production, distribution, analysis, those are all just execution of your strategy. So the next level is where most people think of video. It's the pre-production, which is writing, casting, rehearsing, location scouting, all those things.
The initial creative treatment, I think, is a part of that, right? Strategy doesn't result in a creative treatment; it results in a strategic concept and a plan.
Then you go in, right next to that is production. That's where you either animate or you hit record in some form or another. And then post-production mostly happens in live action stuff, but I imagine there's some in animation too.
This is a format that requires no editing because we're flawless.
Right.
So minimal post-production on something like this.
And so anyhow, that's the editing, the titles and sound and that kind of stuff. So that's that second layer. That's where you actually make, and at the end of that, that's where you make, or you end up with the MP4 file or the .mov, whatever it is.
So it's not disregarding the deliverable, it's just that the deliverable is part of
You're only halfway at this
process.
point.
Yep.
So what happens after that? There's another layer. Go ahead.
Yeah, and so you've made the thing, so you've really got to get people to see it.
Yep.
Distribution and promotion is what's on that next level, and they really go together. There's a lot of gray area between the two. The way that we tend to look at it is distribution is getting it out there in a place where people can see it and can find it. Promotion is driving people to it once you've put it there. Distribution is kind of a wide net, not targeted at anyone specifically. Promotion is really where you start to target specific people to that specific place.
Yep.
And then, of course, once you've got people watching it for a little while and doing the action that you're asking them to do, you've got to analyze what you're looking at. And so whether that's assessing the content that you've made, and you can look at like those kind of, we tend to call them vanity metrics, but like play rate, engagement, those kinds of things, play count. Those are things that really tell you about the content that you've created, and is it effective? Is it too long? Is it are you getting the click-through rates on it? That's then the kind of value metrics. Click-through rates, leads generated, revenue generated by video. I mean, some of these platforms can connect with Salesforce or whatever you're using, and you can actually tie a deal to videos that buyer watched.
Yep.
Which is a tremendous way to show ROI. I think a lot of people have trouble understanding how they can show an ROI on, well, a lot of marketing efforts, but certainly video. But video is one of those formats that just, you get a lot more information. You can understand, like you always say about white papers, right?
You get one metric.
Download.
You get one metric, a download.
But you have no idea how much of it they read, if they read it at all.
What parts they really enjoyed or didn't.
With video, you get to see how many times somebody watched, which parts they rewatched. If you're making 3 main bullet points in a video and a specific prospect watched point 2 3 times and the other points only once, well, next time you're on the phone with them, you may want to talk about that middle point. That's hugely valuable information that you can gather from this stuff, and you feed that then back all into, what are we going to do next? We're going to reiterate this. It's a cycle. So were our initial goals a little arbitrary and maybe a little lofty? Let's reassess those. Was our video too long? Was it too scattered? Let's break it up into multiple pieces.
Put it in the right places.
Do you just put that into the next round of your strategy? You go back to that foundation and then you just execute again.
I was on a discovery call with a prospect, and the CMO or VP, she said that video is no good for demand generation.
Well, I don't see
and
that.
I didn't sleep well at night. I'm like, what the hell is what is she talking about? And I realized later, I think what she meant was attribution. She didn't know that there was the ability to attribute successful outcomes from video. She thought it was just like YouTube. You get it out there and hope someone watches.
Something happens, but you never know.
Yes.
Okay.
So I think that's a huge point that we're trying to educate a lot of professionals and people in the marketing and even sales and customer success worlds. So.
Is that when you went on that 3-day bender?
That's about every other 3 days. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Is he laughing at us or is he laughing at something he's editing?
I don't know.
Thanks, Tucker. We got to get our own room for this. All right, let's move on to what we're really going to focus on in today's webisode? Podcast?
That's interesting.
Webisode?
I don't know.
We're going to figure out a name for this thing eventually.
I'll either like it or hate it in about 10 minutes.
Well, 5 years, I know that's true. Okay, so strategy. Strategy is the foundation. Strategy, that's why we're focusing this episode on it.
You're something different
Committed
every
to say a
time.
different thing every single time. We're focusing on just the strategy because that's really, I mean, again, in our visual, that's the biggest individual section. That's the foundation. Everything else is execution. And so next time, we can just focus on executing it. But let's really jump into kind of the two parts of strategy. There's what we like to call the diagnosis phase, and then that's followed up with the prescription phase.
Yep.
So for us, that works because typically we're coming into a new client. We don't necessarily have a lot of understanding, or even if we're working with an existing client, like it's a new initiative. Mm-hmm. There are different goals. There are different audiences than maybe stuff we've done before.
Department with the same client.
I think it's also important to mention at this time too that this kind of process or this approach to strategy, it can apply to an individual video, an initiative or a campaign, or like an entire department or an entire company's like video roadmap.
Yep.
Like it works on all levels. You just kind of have to look at it from a slightly different perspective.
It's a scale thing.
But the things that you want to address, the things you want to diagnose, and the things you want to prescribe are the same.
Process, exactly. The process applies to any situation.
Now, diagnose and prescribe is something that we've certainly taken from the whole win without pitching model, but it does kind of make sense. You wouldn't go to a doctor and walk in. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people actually do this, right? And they walk in with their internet diagnosis, and they say, I need Valtrex.
For herpes? Yeah.
Also for shingles.
Is it?
That's what I was given for shingles.
Oh.
Yes, because I'm an old man. So let's say you walk into your doctor and you say, hey doc, I need a prescription for Valtrex. My guess is, if your doctor is any good, they'll take a half step back and they're going to ask you a little bit about what symptoms you're presenting, right? They're going to diagnose what's actually going on. They're going to run some blood tests, that kind of thing, right? Before they just give you the prescription for Valtrex.
Or if they did then write you the prescription for Valtrex,
thank you.
Our sponsor is Valtrex. That would be malpractice.
Yes.
So as professionals, we can't just go ahead and make the video that our client thinks they need to make without going through the process, because we would be doing a disservice to them and perhaps ruining our reputation as well.
And we'd make more money if we did that.
Yeah, I know.
But it's about principles.
Yeah.
And money. Okay, so let's kind of dive into the diagnosis phase here. Let's get to that herpes diagnosis, shall we?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So first thing you want to look at with kind of diagnosing, again, this is all an audit. So it starts with the goals. What?
Sorry.
Did you have something you want to say? Or
I was holding it in from before.
I see. Okay, that's fair. So you want to assess really what are your goals top level, right? As a company, what are you trying to do this year? Are you trying to increase revenue by $6 million? Are you trying to increase your subscriber base? Are you trying to maybe on a department level increase MQLs, decrease churn, reduce your sales cycle?
Yeah.
Right? To take a week out of your sales cycle, and then theoretically, as long as you don't use that time for vacation, right? Sell more that year, right? So what is it that your company or department are really trying to do? Then is there something specific that you want this particular initiative to do, right? And I think that goes also to, and again, I hope the manifesto is something of ours that you've read. We'll put it in the show notes. is that goes to the purpose part. Purpose is first. And you can't really determine your purpose until you understand what goal or goals, hopefully a specific goal with a specific video, you are trying to achieve. But even if it's a campaign or a departmental roadmap, like what are the goals we're trying to achieve? Anything else on goals?
No.
Okay. Well, that was a lot shorter than yesterday. So after goals, what's next?
Well, next we've got audience.
Okay.
Again, the word specific comes up here, and it does quite a bit throughout this. But audience, who are we talking to? And so there's this. Again, this is the diagnosis phase. So we're just trying to get an understanding of what types of clients you have or you're aiming to acquire. And I don't know that it necessarily comes down to personas. I guess how would you? Where does that come in?
Well, I like to. Again, I think with the audience, we're kind of auditing, right? We're assessing who are our defined personas. Hopefully we've got defined personas, but like who are, even if, let's say you're an IT company, even if you know that typically the people who your sales team starts to engage with first are like technical people, but it's the people who are higher up than that, maybe not as high as the C-suite, but the people who are higher up than that are the people who are actually making the decision.
Right.
Well, then you may want to create content that speaks technically to that initial contact, but you also know that ultimately you're going to need to provide content for that decision maker and potentially, I don't want to say dumb it down necessarily, but feed them the things that they want to know. They want to know about ROI. Why should they be investing in this kind of thing, right? A technical person wants to know, is it going to work? Does it work with what we've got? Is it easy to implement? Is it easy to manage? All those kinds of things.
So some of those people at lower levels, wherever they are more focused on like the specific components of whatever you're talking about, but up at the top, they're more value driven.
Yeah.
And future focused.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the reasons that God love them. I'd rather be talking to a CMO or a CEO anytime we're talking to a potential new client than a digital marketing manager.
They've got a vision.
There's nothing wrong with a digital marketing manager, and they typically end up being our primary point of contact going forward. But it's a lot easier to have value-driven conversations on what we can do for a company to those higher up people. So going back to that, you've got to know, again, who are the people you interact with. Especially if you're coming up with kind of an overall roadmap, what's the journey that they take, right? Each persona has a slightly different journey as they go through the funnel or through the flywheel, whichever one you've adopted at this point. And what are those questions that they're asking? And then that kind of gives you that initial level of that map to create video content that answers those questions.
Yep.
That's it. It's not, I mean, that's one of the easiest ways to just come up with a comprehensive plan where they're telling you exactly what the content you should make by understanding what they need to know.
Yeah.
And they tell you what they need to know before they buy, because the people who don't get that stuff answered don't buy. And the people who do end up getting those things addressed, whether it's by the marketing department, sales department, whatever. It happens. So you've got to understand who your audience is, what their journey is, and then when we get to the prescription part, you'll see that's where then you kind of narrow in on those behaviors.
So next we've got channels. Let's talk about channels.
That sounds good.
So this is, again, I keep saying it, but this is diagnosis. What channels do you have at your disposal? Are you accustomed to using? And so the obvious ones come to mind of social, right? You've got, with video, there's YouTube or Vimeo or whatever. But then you've got your website, Facebook, LinkedIn. All of those are doing their own native video uploads these days. Yep. But there's some really other forgotten, interesting channels. Yesterday you were talking about this. Sometimes your audience that you're trying to address is in your own building, right? And so the TV displays that are on in your office could be a channel, or an event that you've got coming up could be a channel. Where trade shows,
like trade shows. Your email list is often a forgotten channel. And I think some of it is in the word channel, right? You think channel, so maybe you think social channels, but like your email list is a captive audience, right? Go ahead and publish stuff to them.
And Programmatic,
definitely. I mean, throw some ads on Hulu or
which
CNN.com.
ends up just being a choke point for hundreds of channels.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's all I have to say on channels.
All right. Let's move through this. Other content. Why is it important to understand your other content?
Well, I keep coming back to the manifesto, but the part of the manifesto that applies here is integrate. Mm-hmm. Right? Our video content doesn't live on an island. It doesn't live in a bubble. It isn't its own thing. It's part of this overall content that you put out there. And so it kind of needs to speak to all that other content. It's perfectly fine to create a video that leads someone to another piece of content in that same part of the funnel. Like, people don't always have to move straight down through the funnel. They don't have to take 4 steps to go from awareness to
video.
Right? I mean, they can bounce around. I like to always think about it as a game of Plinko. Right? You put that prospect in, and it bounces around, sometimes laterally, sometimes down, sometimes it can bounce back up. Like, it bounces around, but eventually ends up either not scoring, or it scores and they become a buyer, right? So you have to be aware of the other content to know how you can complement that content. It's also a great way to looking at your well-performing content is a great way to understand how you can make additional video content. Either make a video version of that white paper, or make a promo video driving people to that white paper. Instead of making an ebook, turn your ebook into a VBook. Exactly. People want to click play. They want to watch stuff. They want to listen to people for 23 minutes plus talking about whatever it is they talk about.
And I think
bell tracks.
We have to say it 4 more times. Right?
Yeah, I think that's what the contract says. 4 times in 30 minutes.
But also, you need some, like, if you're making video, that this needs to match in tone, in voice, and sometimes even look as to who and what your brand is about.
Sure. Yep.
So you can't neglect that.
Yeah.
Video is a visual and an audio.
Yeah, I think there's also a culture element to it, and you speak to this a lot, but like, we get very frustrated when people come to us just saying we need a company culture video.
Right.
And kind of our first response to that is yes, thank you. But our second response to that is typically your culture should bleed through in all the content you're making anyway. Right? So kind of the library of content you create should really give a sense of for people of what your corporate culture is anyway.
Right.
Competition is next on this list. Why would you want to look at your competition?
This is kind of a softer element of the diagnosis, but I think it's just interesting to be aware of what your competition is doing, especially if we're working with a client in a new industry, let's say. I want to get take a temperature of what's going on out there, not necessarily to copy or diversify, but just to take the temperature of that industry, perhaps.
Okay. I love it as a way to see what your competition is doing and figure out what they missed. Right? Is it something in messaging? Is it the way that they present themselves? Is it the quality is it too polished and it doesn't get to any substance? Like not something to copy, but something to find the opportunities to say something or communicate something better than your competition. Especially if you haven't gotten into a whole lot of video before, but a lot of your competition does have video content. That's a great way. Just look at it all, see where the gaps are, and fill those gaps.
Sure.
Resources. Go ahead.
I think of 3 main things here. There's plenty more, but the first one being budget.
Sure.
How much can you spend, or are you willing to spend to achieve a particular goal? Then we've got time. Do we have a specific event coming up that we need to get this thing ready for, or a product launch? Resources.
Like people. Kind of, yeah.
Yeah, human resources. So do you have an internal team that you could leverage to make this content, or do you need to go outside? How many, are there people within your organization who can distribute and promote this stuff, or do you need to use an agency to do that as well?
Sure, okay.
So budget, time, and people, what options do you have?
And I think the key there too, to harp on the manifesto again, that's the attainable part, right? Like, video can be expensive, but it doesn't always have to be. In fact, the further you get down in the funnel, the further along in that journey, you're able to get away with a lot scrappier content. So the money and the people that you have can just dictate what level of production value you put into something, and that's fine.
We happen to have production equipment, being a video agency, so we've got cameras and whatnot. But we could easily we could easily just stick an iPhone up there and be producing this thing for free. This is costing us nothing to do, but somebody else who doesn't have a professional camera could use an iPhone. And again, it just comes down to resources.
Right. I think the diagnosis of your resources is not to say we don't have enough resources to make something. It's to say these are the resources we have and the constraints that we're living in to make this thing. And it's not a don't do it, it's just here's what reasonable is.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So we've looked at all that stuff. We've kind of gone through that diagnosis. Now, how do we synthesize all of that information and kind of map it out into the information that we need to put together to then execute? But this is the putting together of the plan. So where does that start? We started with goals in our diagnosis. So where does that kind of map in terms of our prescription here?
Well, it starts with purpose.
Okay.
What video or why are we making a particular video? So this matches directly with goals. It also matches very much with the second thing on here, which is action. What do you want someone to do immediately after? How do you want them to think? What do you want them to feel? What do you want them to do?
I think that's so important because there's a lot of video that's made, and we've made some of them, unfortunately, that say something, and it may even be a compelling thing, but they don't take advantage of having captured that person's attention and then ask them to do anything. And you don't have to ask them to buy at that point. You don't have to ask them to sign up for a free trial. Like the Plinko game, you can ask them to go download this white paper or check out your video library on X, Y, or Z.
Call your congressman or whatever.
Exactly.
Just do us a favor and don't embed a video on your website and have the action be visit our website to find more information. That's something that goes on YouTube, and that just speaks to like how many deliverables you may need, depending on where you put them. So,
okay, so from our assessment of our goals, we've kind of got our purpose. Can that be a broad purpose?
No, very specific.
Okay,
we're doing one thing for one particular audience, getting them to take one particular action.
Okay, so we're synthesizing all that information, and we're gonna say, I want our Julian persona to watch this video, and when he's done watching, I want him to sign up for a free trial. And because the purpose of this particular campaign is increasing our free trials.
Right.
We've got a new release out. We want to get a whole bunch of people into the demo or into the free trial, and we know that those people are going to convert.
Yeah, you know that 10% of them are going to convert. So let's get 500 people to try it out, and someone can do the math for me. You do the math at home.
Equals X. Okay, so then it sounds like one of the things to avoid is kind of making that one video to rule them all.
Right.
Which is a trap that so many, and I get it, because it goes back to the resources thing. People are for some reason scared off by video oftentimes. Like they think it's this big, expensive, complicated thing that they don't know how to do. And sometimes it is.
It certainly can be.
But what they try to do is they try to cram like 2 years of ideas into one script, talking to all of their personas about everything they do as a company. And that's where you find so often that they get to the call to action at the end. They know there needs to be a call to action. And they're like, I don't know, we said 1,003 things. Just go to the website. Like it should be pretty obvious, like coming up with your CTA, whether it's baked in or part of the hosting platform or wherever it is, like that thing should be pretty self-evident once you have the purpose for the video. You know you've watched this video, and it should be pretty obvious that they should go sign up for a demo, get a free trial, whatever it is. It kind of fixes itself. It's also important to restrict it to persona too. You don't necessarily want to talk to multiple personas in one video because you end up with the lowest common denominator and not actually connecting with either persona.
Yep.
Okay, so we've got those things. Now, that kind of gives us the information we need to come up with probably a creative treatment and a script and whatever, but then once, again, that noun, that video is made, how do we know what to do with it then?
Well, you've got to have a strategic plan. We want this to be in these channels because we're talking to these personas and that's where they live and see things. Or also, it's appropriate for this channel because it's very business oriented. So it's kind of a plan. It is loose at best. A lot of times your creative can inform the channel you're working with. That's probably...
Yeah, well, and I think, what I tend to struggle with is how detailed that plan needs to be. Sometimes it can be as simple as this video is going to go onto YouTube, be embedded on our product page, and we're going to share it to LinkedIn and Facebook. Because again, what we know about that Julian persona, for example, is that they interact with us primarily on LinkedIn and then secondarily on Facebook. Mm-hmm. So we're again using all the information we've kind of audited, we've kind of gathered to help us determine where it's going to go. Right. You could go as deep as basically giving any kind of demographic or targeting information so that if you're executing a paid promotion campaign, you could hand that off to an intern and they just have all the blanks that they're filling out as they're executing that campaign. Mm-hmm. So at the very least, you just need to know where you're going to put it. And then, of course, that tells you what assets you need.
Right.
What calls to action, what kind of thumbnails. YouTube likes different kinds of thumbnails, and LinkedIn doesn't need a thumbnail because it auto-plays, etc.
You can't embed actions within a video on YouTube, but you can do that on your website. Whoa, is that a spider?
No, you're imagining things. It's the Topo Chico. Our fantastic sponsor. And then the last one on here quickly is metrics of success. And this is did I say that right?
It was close. It was really close.
It was close. Metrics. Metrics, it was the Valtrex, of success. So I think it's really important.
Really beating that one to death.
Yep. If our audience has made it this long, they'll appreciate it. So the metrics of success are something that you absolutely have to determine now.
Why?
Because if you get to the point where you're looking at your numbers 3, 6, 12 months after you've released this campaign, video, whatever, it's real easy to look at those numbers without having set a benchmark and say, that kind of worked. Because that's basically all you can do.
Sure.
And sure, it may seem arbitrary, but if you're launching a YouTube channel, like a pre-awareness, educational, very lightly branded YouTube channel for your prospects or even pre-prospects, and you launch that channel and you haven't determined how many subscribers you want, how many views make sense, then you're going to get to that point where you're supposed to go back and check the report, and you're not going to know whether 567 subscribers is good or bad.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But if you said at the beginning, as arbitrary as it may seem, we're aiming for 500 subscribers, you can say this was successful because 567 means you met your goal.
Sure.
Now, you could also say we want 1,000 subscribers in 3 months. And if you get to that point and you've only got the 567, well, that's where you get to go back and say, how do we come up with that 1,000 subscribers? What do we know now that may tweak our goal? Your goals can change. It's all an iterative process. So how can we maybe we miss these? How can we either tweak these numbers, or what do we need to change in the content or the execution of it to hit these numbers in our next 3 months?
Right. And another thing, the metrics of success can also help determine your distribution and promotion plan. If you know that 10% of your demo users convert to paid users, and you need to hit 50 paying users, then you know that at least 500 people need to see this. So, so with an 80% engagement or whatever, so that can inform other parts of of this plan as well.
Well, and that's my favorite part of analysis too, which we'll get in the next taping.
Yeah.
Kind of out of episodes, out of our next taping, is that you get to learn so much about your audience when you look at your numbers, right? I mean, you may have certain assumptions, but you get to understand once you give it that initial 3 or 6 months. You get to understand how they're actually interacting with it, and you learn so much about their behavior through that too. We'll get into that a little bit more deeply next time. So that's essentially your prescription. That's your strategy. That's your plan. That's what gets you to your strategic concept. We've got an example that we've used for a client. We've changed a couple key things just to. One, to help it better align with this presentation, but two, just to take out some proprietary information. So you can certainly take a deeper look at this. We'll attach this in the show notes. Perfect. But it's all here: purpose, persona, action, distribution, and promotion.
If you guys have questions, again, we'll make ourselves available to kind of walk you through what we've done here for the Convince Your Boss concept, and be able to help you through that. And if you want to use that as your own sort of template for building your own strategies, feel free to use that.
Ooh, that's a thing we should create.
Sure.
We should just take all the text out of there.
Yeah.
And make it kind of fillable.
Yeah.
And just put that up. We'll get somebody working on that sometime. Because I think that could be helpful, even just having those bullet points in there. Right. And they've got to, we can't help you diagnose it, but we can at least give you the prescription pad, as it were, for Valtrex. 3 times left, and we're running out of time. Okay, so quick rundown. The 7 phases of practicing video starts with strategy, which is what we got into today. So next time we're going to get into the next level of it, which is kind of the 3 stages of production. Pre-production, production, post-production. Then we've got the thing. So the next level up is the distribution and promotion.
Right.
And then once we've got it out there for a little bit of time, which we've determined in our strategy, then we're going to analyze those numbers. So that's essentially just executing the plan that we've kind of walked through today.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I think this went better than I expected.
Yeah.
All right, good. Well, at some point we'll go over the execution part of this, and until that time, you stay frosty, Miami.
I need a sign-off thing.
Yeah, I need a better one. I just made that up.
Stay fresh, cheese bags.
I saw that recently.
I don't know.
Did you see that meme too?
Yeah, my wife sent it.
Yes. It's like from Aldi. They're like stay fresh cheese bags. Stay fresh cheese bags. I like it. Stay frosty, Miami.